what I would have actually have wished was that my mom had written a letter to me. If she would have said something to me directly. Because I feel that everyone has said their version of the story, but I really wish I would have just known. It must not have been easy to know that you're dying and you're leaving behind 2 young children. My brother has memories of her. My aunt has memories of her. My dad has memories of her. Everyone has memories of her but me.
From the Totem Project, this is Full Moon Women, a community and a podcast about the inner lives of women. On today's episode, we dive into the story of a motherless mother, a 36-year-old woman originally from India who finally, after a very bumpy journey, found her way as a mother in the tiny country of Holland. I'm Jamie Younger, your host. And as a woman myself, I feel damn lucky that I can do this work of bringing unique women's stories to the world, stories that move me and hopefully inspire all of us, stories that make us realize just how strong and how vulnerable we are, stories that we might just learn from and also maybe help us make important decisions in our own lives, maybe to start telling our own stories. As I shared earlier, this is a podcast, but also a community. Well, let me tell you how the show is organized. Every month, we publish the episodes in couplets. The first episode is one woman's story, something personal from her inner life, a long-form narrative piece. The second episode is a conversation that I have with someone who can give us a greater context and hopefully a greater appreciation for the storytelling woman's story. On the show today, we are sharing our very first episode, the story of Brinda van Berg. When I first met Brinda, she was super pregnant with her second child. And early into getting to know Brinda, she told me that her own mom had died when she was just 2 years old. And it struck me, like, here's this woman who is having to figure it out without a mom, figuring out how to be a mom without having a mom. And, frankly, most of us didn't have it perfect or nice with our moms, but we had it. I mean, whatever we had. But I wondered, what had life been like for Brinda? And what had motherhood in specific felt like for her? I was also really curious what her story might reveal about this thing called the mother myth. The myth that we all tell about how mothers ought to be, how they are essential, how they are holy, how mothers are unconditionally there for you. But what if you never really had a mom? What then? Today, Brinda lives in the Netherlands, otherwise known as Holland, with her husband, Don, and their 2 kids, Sweva and Shiv. And like me, Holland is her adopted homeland. Brinda grew up in India.
I was born in Bombay. At that time, my brother was 6 already, so I had a big age difference with him. We stayed there till I was about 5, 6 years old. And then my dad, being a marine engineer, ended up moving to Singapore because there was better work opportunities over there. So then we moved to Singapore. He had gotten remarried and he had a pretty, I would say, complicated relationship with my stepmother. And I was an individual who always reacted to a stressful environment. So I would call out the abuse. What I didn't think was fair. If I didn't feel something was fair, I reacted on that. My stepmother was physically and verbally abusive, and particularly towards me. And I think it came perhaps from a place of just not able to handle another female sort of taking a lot of the attention from her partner. So I would call out on that behavior. And as a result of that, I think they found it hard to parent me because I would constantly call it out and I was having issues at school and wasn't fitting in.
It's hard to imagine, right? When you lost your mom at the age of 2, that pain can play out in your development as a young kid. I asked Brinda if she ever remembered anyone explicitly telling her that her mom had died, and she didn't. But she had been told many times that she had been, like, quote unquote, a horrible sleeper.
I would wake up in the middle of the night just crying, and nobody could do anything to console me. And I feel that it was probably me asking for my mom. And nobody was able to comfort me in the same way. It was that moment, I think, when somebody else came into my life and was given that role to take care of me, that I realized something's gone wrong.
Yeah, something's gone wrong, but nobody's saying what's gone wrong. So when Brinda was a kid, like, what is she supposed to do with all this confusion and despair? And, it's like she's getting angry and she's getting obstinate. And the adults in her world are putting her in this box. Like, she's like a difficult child. That's the box she's in. And this mother figure, the new one, the stepmom, she's not only failing to protect Brinda against this world that's judging her, she's like part of the judgment.
But I remember at some point I was being disciplined for something. And then she said, she's like, you need to listen to me. And I said, I don't need to listen to you because you're not my mother. And if you want me to listen to you, you need to be like a mother. And of course, I got into big trouble with that because I said something. I said that. But it's also when I was very young, if something was said to me, like, I would just tell her off. I remember once, like, eating and then being mad at her and just spitting in her face. Like, I remember that very clearly.
Somehow it seems that when we're just 5 or 6 years old, we already have like a very strong sense of what a mother should be. And we know that moms should love us and care for us, and they shouldn't be mean or hit us. I mean, we know that, and we definitely know when something isn't right.
There was a day where in Bombay, before we moved, we would always go out and play. We lived in a gated community, so we would sort of like be running around in and out of neighbors' homes. And I left the house. I fell down the steps of stairs that was right in front of our house, and I hurt myself. And even though I could have actually just gone back in and gotten a Band-Aid and stuff, I chose to, with my bruises, to walk several houses down to where my grandparents lived, the grandparents of my mom, because I felt like I wouldn't get the same kind of attention and care from her having fallen down the stairs. And I knew that my grandparents would give it to me. But I, at the age of 5 or 6, could make that decision, was where I was like, this is me knowing that something was not right. And I think a lot of it also, I did it at school. Like whether I would steal or cheat, and it was all just as a result of what was happening at home. Like, I know that now. But back then, it's like you were just a problematic child.
At the age of 6, Brenda moves with her dad and her stepmom to Singapore. And they live there from the time that Brenda is about 6 to about 10. And when she's 10, her stepmom and her dad finally decide, like, she's just too much trouble. And they send her back to India to live with her grandmother and her uncle and his wife.
And that did help. And I was there for a period of about 2 years. And there was still this longing of wanting to go back to my father. And I did when I was about 12. And that lasted only for a year because the problems continued. I think in the end, everyone was literally trying to survive this family that was put together. And nobody really knew how to cope. Like, my dad was gone almost 8 months out of the year because of the kind of work he does. He would be on ships, so he was hardly ever at home. And then I was under the care of this individual. And if I would call it out and tell my dad that, hey, she did this and this, he wouldn't stand up for me.
So at this point in Brinda's life, her mom has died. Her dad has remarried less than a year later. Brinda's stepmom is this horrible witch of a person who abuses her. And her father is gone about 8 months of the year. And then when he does come home, he's not interested at all in hearing Brinda's review of his new wife's behavior.
He perhaps was trying to keep the marriage together because he, in his mind, was like, well, if this falls apart, who's going to take care of my kids?
Right, because somebody has to take care of Brinda and her brother. And just as a reminder, Brinda's living in Singapore, but her real mom's mom, her maternal grandmother, is back in India.
I knew that back home in Chennai in India, that I had my grandmother and my uncle and my aunt. So I went back when I was 13 and then I spent the rest of my high school life over there. So I was there till I was 19 and then I moved off to the US.
Because the thing is, none of this would be happening. The abuse by her stepmom, like moving back and forth from India to Singapore, Brinda lashing out. None of it would be happening if Brinda's mom had been around. Probably not, right? But Brinda's mom died when she was really young.
So my mom died about 2 weeks after my second birthday. And she died from a condition known as primary pulmonary hypertension. In many cases, there are individuals who are born with this condition. So her sister had spoken with a pulmonary specialist in the US and given paperwork and everything. And what that specialist actually drew conclusion from was that my mom, after giving birth to me, had started to take diet pills. He felt that that was probably what had caused the heart to develop the issue. And, if you take diet pills, we now know better, but it can get your heart to race and everything.
I did a little research after hearing Brinda's story, and I learned that in the 1940s and 50s and 60s, amphetamine, which is an upper, was marketed to women and men to help with everyday, quote unquote, mental and emotional distress, and also as a weight loss remedy. In 1970 in the US, almost 1 million people were using amphetamines. And from 1983 to 88, right there during the years that Brinda was born, methamphetamine abuse in the US doubled. Similar trends were happening in countries around the world, including India. Unfortunately, Brinda's mom had become one of the victims of this epidemic. Brinda and I had actually been speaking for quite a while before I realized that I didn't even know her mom's name.
Chitra. So it's that's the name, that's Sweva's second name.
Just again, Sweva is Brinda and her husband Don's daughter.
We named her Sweva Chitra Maria, Maria being Don's, my husband's mother's name. And I found that very meaningful of honoring the family because in many cases, my mom was constantly, people were trying to erase her from my life. So for example, when my dad got married and my stepmother came in, I was told that this is your new mother and you're going to call her Amma, which means mother in Tamil. So it sort of began there, call somebody else your mother. And then everything, like all her possessions and everything, a lot of which was given away instead of kept. When you get married, a woman gets married in India, you get a whole bunch of jewelry, but you also get vessels like pots and pans, and everything has your initials scribed on it. So hers would have been CB on it, but everything is gone. So I have very few things, personal possessions. I have a jewelry, but I have very few personal possessions of hers. People didn't acknowledge that there was this person who had died and that this had left an impact on 2 children. And, it was always like, oh, now you have a stepmother, a new mom, everything is fine. Everything is back to normal in a way.
Basically, everyone tried to erase Chitra from Brinda's life, as if she had never existed. But she had, And it wasn't until Brinda became a mom herself, a mom to a daughter, that it all kind of came full circle.
This person lived and existed and has to be given a place, has to be given a place in my life and my children's life. Had she been living today, my children would have called her Amama, which is a very special meaning because it only is applied to the mother's mother, because it's Amma's Amma. And I was like, that is her name and that is her title.
So Brinda's daughter has an Amama, but she's not alive. And yet she exists somewhere. Sometimes we need the eyes of a child to awaken a forgotten or a neglected part of ourselves. Because, we all know kids look at the world in this totally free, unstructured, unprejudiced way, where we adults, we're kind of blinded by our own experiences and our memories. We desire to reconnect with things that we lost. And in the meantime, what we're looking for is there, right at our feet.
Today's favorite, coincidentally, was looking, because going up the stairs, we have a whole bunch of black and white photos of our family. And she was sitting on the stairs and she was like, oh, that photo there. And there's a photo of my Amama with my mother. This is somewhere in Europe when my mother was less than 2, maybe. It's a photo where they're on the street standing in the winter, so all bundled up, black and white. And the street is practically deserted. So you don't see anyone. It's just the two of them standing there together. And she looks at it. So Eva looks at it and she goes, oh, the baby looks like me and your Amama looks like you. And I was like, well, that's interesting. I've never seen that resemblance, but she saw it. And it's a very special photo for me that I had it on our wedding table also when we were getting married as well, just to sort of keep their place, their presence there.
Brinda has very few personal possessions of her mom's. She has very few photos of her. But she also has this very limited picture of her mom in her mind. I was curious what Brinda knew about her mom. I wondered if she had been told what her mom was like about her mom's personality, something that could help Brinda have a sense of her.
There's a very saintly picture in a way that has been painted of her, that she was very beautiful and that she made everyone feel special. And I think everyone felt that they knew her best. And with her mother and with her sister and with my dad, they all felt that they knew her best. And so sometimes it sort of makes me a bit confused because I'm like, that doesn't sound like the same person that the other person was talking about. She was really very family oriented, very attached to her parents. My grandparents had bought her a house in the same gated community. They had bought a house as well. And the plan was that they would all sort of have their own house, but then grow up, get old, be live together, be close by. A little bit before she turned 30, she decided to become a teacher. And so I even studied for it while she was pregnant with me and everything. And that she always wanted to help young children, impart knowledge to very small children. And she got to do that for a year, maybe, till she was diagnosed with her condition. Because from the time that she was diagnosed to when she passed away, it was 6 months. So it happened quite quick. Those are the few things that I know about her. And it's all this perfect image of this person. Whereas I want to know the flaws of this individual. And if I know my personality and enough about my mother, I would say that we would have probably butted heads a lot and not agreed on many things. But at the same time, it's also this thing where, because not many people talked about her, I feel like I have created this image of who she would have been in my mind. And I think it's maybe either very painful for people to talk about her because she passed away so young, But it's also just, I think people don't necessarily understand why I need to know about her. What I would have actually have wished was that my mom had written a letter to me. If she would have said something to me directly. Because I feel that everyone has said their version of the story, but I really wish I would have just known. It must not have been easy to know that you're dying and leaving behind 2 young children. My brother has memories of her. My aunt has memories of her. My dad has memories of her. Everyone has memories of her but me.
Just 4 years ago, Brenda became a mom herself. And in that glorious, difficult, sometimes magical, lots of times stressful journey of going from being not a mom to being a mom, Brenda started to ask herself a lot of questions about her own childhood that couldn't be answered by anyone.
What I miss is not knowing who I was as a child. Like my dad, when they did raise me, very easily they would say, oh, you were a very problematic child, because I was a child who was voicing things out. And that's not necessarily accepted in a society like India, especially a girl child who's so outspoken. That was very hard for them. But today, when I look at my children, it's like trying to navigate, was I like this as a child? Is this how I was also as a child? Because my dad's mom can be like, oh yeah, looks at Sveva, who's very observant, and be like, oh yeah, Dan was also like this as a child. And I miss that. Yeah, I want to know.
When Brenda was pregnant with her second child, she was pretty overwhelmed, and she didn't have her mom to turn to.
I was like, oh my God, how am I going to do this? How am I going to manage? And all those emotions that I was feeling is that, yeah, I could talk to people, other women about, but I never felt that anyone could connect to me the same way.
It's kind of funny that when she became a mom herself, she wanted to turn to a person, a mom, who she never knew. I mean, what is that about us that makes us think things like that? So Brenda just had to figure it out. But the one thing that she did know for sure was that she wasn't going to let anybody kill her children's spirits or tell her kids to feel differently than how they really felt.
Because growing up, it was not accepted as a girl child being so vocal and outspoken, that a lot of it was put out. You cannot be so open. And it's like anything, if I said, if I called out behaviors where I know I was being hurt, I got punished for it. And so what that only does is that it puts out your fire, because you think, okay, then I don't stand up for myself. I don't speak up for myself. And now I am on the other side where I'm like very obsessed with that my children really speak up for themselves and really, voice themselves out. For example, when Sveva, we bought her a few dresses, and then today she decided she didn't want to wear one of the specific dresses. And then and she's like, I don't want to wear it. I don't like it. She's like, and that's my decision. And then I'm like, okay, go get another dress for yourself. Where she stood up for herself, said she didn't like it. And then for me to say, okay, let it go. It's a dress, first of all. But then it still would not have been something had this been done, an approach or a mentality like this, like a child talking to another parent that way in a very traditional Indian household would not be accepted. And I grew up in that kind of environment. But I still feel like things would have been different had my mom been there. Maybe a bit more guidance is perhaps what I would have wanted the most, was a little bit more like, okay, I've been there, I've done this. Not to say everything that I'm going to do, you need to do, but it's like you want to feel that, okay, I can like relate to somebody. What has happened now is that I have just learned to live my life without her. I have been blessed in that I do have my aunt in India and my aunt in New York who are like mothers to me. And what has probably happened from a result of my mother passing is that I have looked towards other women in general for different parts of not my mother, but, to have that mother thing. So it's like I continue to seek out other women to, where you have that bit of a nurturing sort of relationship with each other. And that's what I think I have ended up doing as a result of not having that one person in my life. That being said, I know that, it's the same thing. Your partner cannot be your everything. So you need to have like different kinds of friends and different kinds of people in your life. And that's probably also maybe the case of your mother.
Since Brenda had mentioned that, a life partner can't be your everything, I had to ask about how losing her mom had affected her sense of romantic relationships, or at least like her expectations of them. She had had such a rough relationship with her dad and her stepmom, these people who were kind of like presumably her role models. So, Brenda told me that her family had expected her to have an arranged marriage, which is very common in India. And Brenda did meet with a few men, but she knew pretty much immediately that it just wasn't for her.
And I was very set in that I was going to find my partner, because my brother had an arranged marriage, and I was very surprised by it. And I then thought, if he's doing it, well, maybe I should just like look into it. And I did. And I just didn't connect with the men, with the guys that my family had hoped I would. And it was just very clear to me that I was just going to meet somebody who was going to be of my choice, probably not Indian. And it just came to a point where I was like, I'm going to meet this person on my own, and I'm going to get married on my terms.
Right. She's going to do things on her own terms, because Brenda, basically from the beginning, had broken the mold. I mean, when she was a girl, she wasn't deeply reverent to her elders. And then as she grew up, she just wasn't going to go with the whole script of an arranged marriage. So basically it begs the question, where is this all going? Where is Brenda headed? And what is she searching for?
I think I wanted somebody who could accept that I came with baggage, in a way, that I had a bit of a story. Because if you grew up in an environment where it was like love was always only if you did things their way, where you loved, or if not, love was taken away. It was for me that when I was going to be with somebody, it was always this thing of like, if I do something wrong, are you just going to leave? Like, is it just, that's it? And I knew that I had issues to deal with. I had bad habits, not healthy and helping my life and things. But that somebody who could just know that, okay, this person has some baggage that she's coming with. And not to say that I was going to carry that baggage with me forever, but to know I came there with it. And I think I needed somebody who was willing to sort of open their arms and say, just, it's okay. And let me fall into their arms and say, I'm still here. Because that's what I really, really wanted, was just somebody who would do that for me. That's a lot to ask out of someone I now know. But that's what I needed in order to be absolutely sure that this person was going to be there for me for the rest of my life, for our lives, together.
So Brenda ends up meeting a Dutch guy, a guy from the Netherlands, a guy named Don Vandenberg.
I somehow knew that I would end up living in Europe at some point. I just knew that would happen. But I never thought the Netherlands. Yeah.
Yeah. And then a few years after marriage, she and Don have their first child. And it's going to be a girl. And this little girl is going to grow up in Holland, not in India. And basically everything in just one generation is radically different. Brenda is the parent now, and she gets to create the home and the life and the family that she wants.
I want to be my kids' safe place. I just want them to know whatever they do in this world, And even if they have hurt somebody or they've done something that was morally not right, I'm your safe place. You're still welcome. And my arms are open. Like, I just want to always be their safe place. And a mother who really made an effort in terms of growing personally, that I don't want to be the one who's like, I'm the mom, so I know it all, sort of a thing. Because many times, like now, Seva's already at an age where she's like, why this, why that? And sometimes I'd be like, I don't know. I can't answer it. And I don't want to give you like some kind of made up answer, because I feel like I will have to like work harder at trying to like continue with that. I'm not always going to get it right. So I think that's for me probably the two main things of just being their safe place, and that I will try better. I know I messed up. I'm going to try better. Because if you are raised in an environment where you are made to feel that your elders know everything and everything they know is the truth and and right, you just are like so messed up in the sense of a child where you feel like you don't know anything. And then you go into adulthood still questioning every decision that you make, which is something I still struggle with, which is like, am I doing the right thing? Is this the right decision? Like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. Instead of just being like, this is what feels right. I'm going to do it, and if it doesn't turn out the way it should, so be it. But somehow making a mistake is so like, oh my God, that's it. I'm going to ruin everybody's life. And what have I done? Like, I've made a mistake.
Brinda had said that she wished her mom had written her a letter. And when she said that, I wondered what she would actually want to put in a letter to her own kids. Like, what would she want her kids to know about her?
That I'm not ashamed of the life that I lived, that I might have done like thing, whether it was like partying too hard or getting into wrong relationships and all of that, I'm not ashamed of any of it. And to know where like I sort of came from, and not to say those decisions were right and they were acceptable, but this is the life that I had. And I worked really hard to overcome it. I had to unlearn a lot of things, and I had to relearn a lot of things and learn a lot of things, moving to a foreign country and language. And I did all of that. And I did that primarily because I wanted my children to have a more stable life. And so I worked really hard. My kids are they are my greatest joys, and I really want them to know that they were very, very, very loved, and to feel that.
Brinda and I were sitting in her living room for the interview, and there was this very warm fire going. And I asked her to close her eyes and to picture her mom sitting there with us, right next to her on the couch where she was sitting. And I asked Brinda what she would want to tell her mom, if she could, about herself and how her life was right now.
Well, I know the first thing I would tell her is, I really, really missed you. I missed not having hugs from you, not listening to your voice, not knowing your voice, that you just live on, or I try my best that you live on through me and my children. And that's how I try to keep you alive, is to talk to them about you. And that's all I wish and I wish more people had done that, was to keep you alive. And I'm sorry you missed out on so much. Your children, and your grandchildren, because I know that's how important family was to you. But I'm happy and I'm proud for what I stood up for, because I knew I had to fight for the life that I wanted to have and create. And I think I'll continue to miss you for the rest of my life. That's what I would tell them.
Thank you so much for listening to this very first episode of Full Moon Women, with the generous and beautiful Brenda Berg. If you haven't subscribed to the show yet, please subscribe or follow wherever you get your podcasts. If you were moved by this story, we invite you to leave Brenda a voice message and tell her how her story impacted you. And we may just include your message in our upcoming listener feedback episode related to Brinda's story. We would love to hear from you, and so would Brinda. Just go to the show notes and look for the link that says voice memo. This show is totally ad-free, and we want to keep it that way. We spend hundreds of hours each month making this show for you because we really love to do it. And if you love what we're making and it enriches your life, even in a small way, we would be so grateful for your support. You can help us by making a monthly donation on Patreon. Just look for the link to Patreon in the show notes. If you offer a monthly donation, you help us produce this show, and at the same time, you also join the community. In fact, current patrons of the show are in for a super special treat from Brinda. Over the years, Brinda has perfected the art of making Indian chai tea, and she has made us a how-to video just for us, and it is live right now on Patreon. So if you're already a supporter of the show, you can just go to Patreon and check it out. And if you'd like to become a supporter of Full Moon Women, which starts at $3 a month, you can still check it out. You can unlock that post and learn the ways of traditional chai tea making from Brinda. The link for Patreon is in the show notes. This episode was produced by Pete Herkmans and myself. It was edited by Pete. I'm Jamie Younger, and you have been listening to Full Moon Women.